The Missouri regular season ends with a thud, but it's not time to give up just yet.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso, and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. On today's program, I got to talk about how Missouri's defense was quite a bit improved yesterday, and yet the offense completely failed Missouri yesterday on Senior Day. Before I start the show, I do want to remind you today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And I think like most Missouri fans, have to feel like this. If you'd have told me back in November that if the Tigers were going to go 21-10, 10-8 in the SEC and be easily in the field of 68 in the NCAA tournament, I would have been quite happy with that. I would have taken it right at that moment. I think I probably speak for most Missouri fans when I say that. And yet, I don't think anyone felt happy after yesterday's basketball game. I don't think anybody was feeling overly satisfied about the last, let's say, 2.5 weeks of Missouri basketball here, because to be brutally honest, this season ended with a thud and a 3-game losing streak. And it's not just me. Dennis Gates said after the game, quote, "To be able to win 10 games in this conference is a great accomplishment." I don't want to belittle that, but we left a lot on the table where I thought we could have turned the corner and finished in a double bye or even competed for a conference championship. So most of you probably saw after the game, the Missouri seniors were honored post-game. And, well, when he took the mic, Dennis Gates got a little bit emotional there for a second. And in a touching moment, it was cool that the team kind of rallied around him and gave him all a giant hug, that type of deal. So that was great to see. Definitely showed the togetherness of this team, and yet I think there was a lot of mixed emotions there from Dennis Gates, I would have to assume. Not only pride in his team, but also real disappointment there as well. I think there was a lot of emotions that hit Dennis Gates there in that moment, I have to assume. So while there was a real sense of sadness there at Mizzou Arena at the end of the ball game, without a doubt, I would say yet all is not lost, ladies and gentlemen, because we've seen what the ceiling of this team is, and that ceiling is quite high. And in fact, just remember back to 2002, the 01-02 season happened to be my freshman year at the University of Missouri, by the way. And just a few months after the World Trade Center attacks, just to give you some context of the moment here, Missouri 1-0 in basketball in the country, with Iowa coming to town in the Hearn Center, the biggest crowd I've ever personally seen in the Hearn Center. By the way, let's just say I think the fire marshal may have taken a day off in that particular day, because I don't remember any other times seeing multiple people sitting in the aisles with legs dangling over the edge like I saw that day in Missouri. So an incredible crowd, but unfortunately, Missouri was blitzed and never really was in that ball game. Lost 83-65 to Iowa at home that day. And guess what? That was the start of a 3-game for Missouri, much like the Tigers have just suffered here recently. And by the way, that team, very similar in terms of profile. 12th in offense, according to Ken Palm, but 81st in defense. That team would also finish 20-10. And a very like 9-7 in the Big 12 that year. And surprisingly, Missouri got a 12 seed in Big Dance. I think most of us were thinking 8-9 game has had become the pattern for Quinn Snyder during that era. But it turned out to be a blessing in disguise that Missouri was seeded lower than they thought. Missouri steamrolls fifth-seeded Miami in the first round, then beats fourth-seeded Ohio State in round 2 before taking down UCLA. Again, double-digit victories, all 3 of those games for Missouri before, well, losing to Oklahoma in the infamous Clarence Gilbert 1-for-16 game in the Elite Eight. So the bottom line is, there's still time for Missouri to make a run in the NCAA tournament. And just like that team in 01-02 did, that team is still thought of fondly by Missouri fans, despite what was obviously a very disappointing regular season, and much more disappointing regular season in terms of expectations than what Missouri just suffered here. But much like I think this team, well, that 02 team, obviously had very high upside. They had ability to play at a high level with the aforementioned Clarence Gilbert, with Arthur Johnson, with Kareem Rush, of course, Ricky Paulding, just a lot of talent on that team. Hey, guess what? There's a lot of offensive firepower on this Missouri team as well. We've seen the upside. In fact, I think this team has a higher upside than the 01-02 team that I'm talking about from my freshman year. Again, not to go off into too big of a history lesson here. The whole point here is just to give you some context that, yes, even when things look bad at the end of the season, it's not as though that 01-02 team finished on a hot streak. They lost the last game of the regular season to Kansas. They lost in the second round of the Big 12 tournament. It wasn't like there was a lot of obvious signs that the team was getting it right at the end of the season. So basically, right now it seems like there's a lot of Missouri fans that just want to assume that the current trend is going to continue into March Madness. Fortunately, the reality is it might. But the other obvious reality is it might not too. So let's not just assume that we know everything. That's my main point, because especially with this Missouri team, which fortunately, the good news is this team is healthy now. So there is no reason to believe that we still don't have the same upside. Unfortunately, we've seen the downside too, and that means that, hey, a first-round exit in March Madness is obviously quite possible as well. And speaking of injuries and Missouri status, it does sound like Tony Perkins is okay, by the way. There was one moment in the second half where Perkins went down near the Missouri student section, clutching at his knee, and boy, the arena got really quiet there for a second. I was worried that maybe I had missed something was more serious than what it appeared. Well, Perkins either came back, excuse me for not remembering, or was set to for sure. And Dennis Gates said that Tony should be fine after the ball game. So that's a positive note there for certain. And a great start defensively by Missouri against Kentucky yesterday. But then the rest of the game, well, it was mostly more of the same, at least in terms of the results. I do think there's some positives that Missouri can take away from this game, and yet still some questions yet left to be answered. Let's talk about all that, but first I want to talk about FanDuel, because when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And of course, I'm talking about placing live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. The app really is so easy to use. So when you want to win, when you do win, you do also get paid instantly. New FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus. That's if your $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com and get $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And I love stats on the program because numbers don't lie. And when it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, the numbers are on an MVP level with the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds. It can quite literally carry the whole team plus the gear wherever you need to go. It's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with room for up to 8 people, the Armada Pro 4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. Whether you're exploring off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro 4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventures to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com. And by the way, Missouri will be playing on Thursday in the SEC tournament against either Mississippi State or LSU. 6 o'clock tip-off on Thursday in Nashville. Then if the Tigers win that ball game, they'll play Florida on Friday. So there you go. And here's the thing with Missouri. A better start defensively, especially ending of the ball, and start for the Tigers 8 minutes into the ball game. I thought much better defense by Missouri. Josh Gray starting the ball game certainly helped there. Kentucky hit a lot of tough threes, though, and the offense, though, I wrote down 13-18. Missouri was trailing 18-13, I should say. But the offense had really hit a wall despite the fact that there had been better defense there. And sort of, I thought exemplified was the last possession of the first half where I thought just really bad defense by Missouri. You had 10 seconds left that you had to play defense there. Missouri had done a better job of defending the paint, cutting off driving lanes for the most part in the first half. But again, just allowing open threes pretty consistently, and the Wildcats were more than happy to knock them down as well, especially again into the first half. Missouri with just a few seconds left in the game. I don't know how you allow that open of a three-pointer with that little time. Again, if there's ever a time to switch, absolutely everything, it's when the clock is your friend. If there's 5 seconds on the shot clock, heck, if there's 5 seconds on the game clock, you should absolutely just be switching everything or blitzing the ball at that point, because guess what? There's not really enough time to then work the ball around the perimeter and find another shot. To me, Missouri's attention to detail at times defensively was still a little bit lacking. If you break the game down into quarters, well, Kentucky scored 10 points in the first quarter. Then they got 28, 26, and 27. That's still pretty bad defensively, and obviously really good offense for Kentucky. Give them some credit. They are one of the elite teams in the country for a reason. They have shooters all over the place, number one, but also, once again, in a running theme for Missouri, Kentucky goes 26 of 33 on the free throw line. It's really a good defense. Not only are you giving up, obviously, more than 50% from three, but if you're going to give the opposition 33 free throw attempts as well, it's just going to be tough sledding defensively under those. And while Kentucky has plenty of shooting on their roster, I thought they had plenty of ball handling on their roster as well. A lot of capable guards for the Wild. Well, taking advantage of Missouri. I thought Missouri would score the ball and have a chance to set its defense very often in the second half. And what they would do is they would almost do like a three-quarter, half-court type of pressure defensively. And to me, Kentucky was just able to easily handle that. They were just able to beat the Missouri defenders off the dribble pretty consistently there, or draw a foul as they often would. To me, our problem is obviously stopping dribble penetration. Now, if you have the advantage, you just made a shot, you have a set defense, take that advantage. Pack the lane a little bit if you're Missouri. Try it out. Again, understand that Kentucky is knocking down shots too, but it's not as though they're just dribbling the ball down and making one-on-one moves and hitting step back, James Harden, Anthony Robinson style three-pointers. They're getting Missouri into rotation. They're getting guys to help, and then they're kicking it to open shooters. That's probably the entire game. And, well, continued, and it continued. So, again, if you're Missouri, maybe a little bit less aggression defensively at times is what the doctor ordered, because obviously Missouri is at its best defensively when they're able to get teams turning the ball over, sped up, and discombobulated. I'm just not sure that Kentucky was the type of team to speed up and get that advantage in, because they were the ones who made it their advantage, the Missouri pressure. And certainly Mark Mitchell was Missouri's most consistent offensive threat in that ball game, but Marquez Warwick with quite a flurry of offense in the second half, 17 points in just 14 minutes for the offense-defense combo there in the second half. A great steal going one-on-one with a great Euro step finish as well. I was very impressed by Warwick scoring as usual. How much, I'd have to go back and watch, but how much he was being picked on defensively, because that's got to be the only reason that he doesn't play more, to be brutally honest, because Warwick is such a good scorer, not only a shooter, but just a scorer as well. I understand why Missouri fans at times wonder, why doesn't this young man play? I really do understand that, but I think the answer is pretty simple. It's not a great defensive team. I don't think Warwick is a plus there. About doing this podcast, of course, I enjoy it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it 5 days a week. But one thing I don't love being a critic, especially in a loss for Missouri, because these guys, I mean the players, the coaches, but in particularly the players who I'm talking about here, these young men work harder at this. Mizzou basketball, the football players too, they work harder at their sport than anything I've ever done in my entire life. And I say that as somebody who's accomplished a few things in his life too. I'm just telling you the level of effort that these guys show. Watch a Missouri practice on occasion. Watch these guys go through some off-season conditioning. See them in the weight room. Heck, just see them with their shirt off on occasion. And you can tell the amount of work input. Sit here on my comfy chair in my air-conditioned office in the basement of my house to just sit here and wag my finger at a bunch of young men who, again, have tried harder at this endeavor than anything I will ever try. I'll never try as hard as they are in basketball than anything I will in my entire life. In fact, as somebody who played some high school basketball back in the day, even to this day, 20 plus years beyond that experience, I still occasionally have a recurring nightmare about not getting in good enough shape in the off season. See, I would always think, okay, I need to get out there and run. Come on, John, we're getting in shape this off season. You're not going to work yourself into shape during the season like Shaquille O'Neal this year. No, you're actually going to get in shape in the off season. The reality was I never really did it. And because of that, I still think I have weird regrets in the back of my head. And here comes my stupid dream about how I'm getting ready for basketball again, and I didn't get in good enough shape. But the only reason I share that silly story is because of the respect that I have for these guys. I just want everybody to be well aware of that. Hopefully none of these players listen to my podcast or anyone's opinion about Missouri basketball, because really nobody's opinion matters outside of that locker room, outside of their closest friends, closest family, all of that good stuff. So I'll tell you this, Missouri in with a still basketball to be played. And regardless of how this season ends, I'm proud of this team. It's been a great ride, and hopefully we'll have more exciting rides with Dennis Gates to come here in the near future in Missouri basketball. So thanks as always for joining me here on the program. Some happier news to talk about. I'll tell you this. Through the SEC tournament on beat. And by the way, check out Locked On College Basketball so you can be an expert for March before the madness even comes. Again, Locked On College Basketball on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. And I'll be back with you tomorrow, Monday, with another edition of Locked On Mizzou.